Yes, so. Yes, so.
See if it's working now. No. Just start all over.
There we go.
John on the side of it. There should be a slide. You got it.
All right, everybody. Hey, how's it going? Everybody doing okay? All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get things kicked off since it's 7 o'clock. All right. So thank you all for coming to today's public hearing. My name is Mark Beatty. I'm the Senior Community Planner with the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission. This is Carol Flate over here. She is also a Community Planner at the Regional Commission. And we are going to be helping the city of Oxford. Is that loud enough? Is that working? Do I need to turn it up a little?
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be helping the city of Oxford go through your comprehensive plan update for 2022-2023. And so I'm here essentially to notify the public that the process is starting. That's what this first public hearing is for. And also let the steering committee get together. The steering committee, I'll go through what that is. It's a group of people who are going to kind of be guiding us through the process. And then go through a little bit of 30,000 foot level visioning discussion afterwards. So yeah, so that's pretty much what we got right here. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So how many of y'all have participated in a comprehensive plan before? Just kind of get a show of hands. Okay, most of the room is pretty familiar with that. I'll give you a little background on what a comprehensive plan is for those of you who haven't. Essentially, it's a long-term guide to the city's growth, and it's updated every 5 years. So there's a state requirement that's administered by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs that oversees every local government in the state of Georgia. And their responsibility to a requirement to update the comprehensive plan. So each city, each county, every 5 years are required to go through this process. Essentially, it instigates you all to have a discussion to talk about how you want to grow, the things that the community needs the most, and how you can address those things. And so there's a status that every local government gets, our qualified local government status, QLG for short. And that is what's awarded to every local government as long as you maintain an up-to-date. And so the City of Oxford's due date is February 28, 2023. So today is day one, essentially, to start that process. And like I said, our office is going to be facilitating through that. Basically, what a comprehensive plan is trying to do is answer these 4 questions right here. Trying to find out where you're at now. Do local analysis, we do that through local and state and national data sets. Then we have conversations with you all to see where you're at, fact check, try to hear your perspectives of the dynamics of the community, figure out where you're at, what your needs are, what the most pressing issues that you're facing are, and then come up with strategies for how to address those and make the community a better place. So that's the essential goal of every comp plan. So, like I said a little while ago, it's administered by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs and their planning office. They basically just oversee the requirement and review everyone's comprehensive plan to make sure that it meets what's called the minimum requirements or minimum standards for planning that are universal across the state of Georgia. And so those minimum rules require that every comprehensive plan has a series of elements. They're all listed right here. The ones that are in bold are the ones that the city of Oxford is required to have They have a community goals section, which includes a vision statement, which is that 30,000-foot view of, hey, this is what we want to be in 20 years, and this is how we're going to get there. Then you have needs and opportunities. That's that deep dive into the data and to what our discussions are through the input meetings and the surveys that we have through this process. And then you have a broadband element. That's a new one that the state started requiring in 2018. It's essentially a look at the existing broadband infrastructure that you have in your community and trying to find out where, ways for improvement are and where there are gaps in service. So Oxford may be on the positive end of that, and that you're close to, Atlanta and Covington. So I'm sure y'all have pretty good service, pretty decent service here, but everything can always be improved. So that's the purpose of that section. And then you have a community work program. That is going to be the local government's 5-year to-do list, basically. It's going to be itemized, budgeted, list at the end of the document. That's going to be correlating with all the needs and opportunities and vision and goals from the earlier sections of the chapter or document. And then they're going to be, coming up with specific targeted goals for the city to, accomplish over the next 5 years. With that, not listed up here, there's a report of accomplishments. So the last work program is going to have a table saying what the status of every project is. And so DCA can make sure that you guys are accomplishing your goals the way that they expect you to. There's a couple of benefits to where if you check off a certain number of goals and you start qualifying for things like Plan First, which is basically an award, to the community, it's just a special grant opportunities. The other two that are required for Oxford is a land use element, and that's going to correlate directly with your zoning ordinance map. And basically, the way that that is used is there's going to be a future land use map, which we'll go over in a little while. And that's how your local zoning commission makes decisions, essentially. Somebody comes to the city for a rezone request, they look at that future land use map that was determined during this process, and it kind of gives them some guidance on whether or not that rezone request is appropriate for the community and the community's vision. So that's a very important section because it has legal implications. So that one is something that we'll go over a few times through the process. And then lastly, a transportation element is going to be required for Oxford because you are within the Atlanta Metropolitan Planning Organization boundary. So it's a big chunk of land that is around Atlanta. It's essentially where all the major transportation corridors are for the region. It's kind of confusing because as a regional commission, you are within the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission's boundaries, not Atlanta's. But from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, you are within Atlanta's boundary. So some overlap there, but that's basically requiring you to have a transportation element. So you'll have your own specific transportation chapter going over some needs and opportunities that you can, work on over the next 5 years also. And the rest of those you don't need. For example, you don't need an economic development element because you're not in a tier 1 job tax credit county. You're in tier 2, so you don't need that. Not to say there won't be economic development scattered throughout this plan. There will be, especially in the needs and opportunity section. It's just not its own required chapter. So same for housing. That's only for entitlement communities like Athens, Atlanta, Savannah, Macon, all your big areas. So for the planning process, like I said, the regional commission, myself and Carol, we're going to be leading Oxford and the steering committee through this process to update your comprehensive plan. Takes about 6 to 8 months or so to get through the process, have all the meetings that we need to have. There's a lot of information to crunch, into less than 100 pages to try to capture the dynamics and feel of your community. So we'll have lots of discussions to go over everything. Our responsibility is to facilitate those discussions and assemble all the data so that we're having an informed discussion every time we get together. That's the goal. There's a steering committee that's required for every comprehensive plan update. And this is basically just a local group of stakeholders that's put together. And the steering committee's role is to guide myself and Carol through the writing and through the discussions. Y'all are basically the sounding board for the final draft for every part of the plan, essentially, to make sure that it's hitting what it needs to hit as far as community goals and the things that you want to accomplish over the next 5 years. Steering committee is the official reviewer, essentially, for the local government as we go through the process. So everyone in here who's on the steering committee, thank you for being here. You'll get lots of emails from us through the next year. So keep an eye out for those. That's allergies. And then, so ultimately, at the end of this process in February, the local government is going to be required to adopt this comprehensive plan. So what we kind of try to shoot for is that we have a final draft available to the local government at least 90 days before your due date at the end of February next year. So there's plenty of time to review it. And then what happens is it has to be submitted to us, which is kind of odd because we're the ones writing it, but it has to be submitted to us and then passed over to DCA for a regional and state review to make sure that y'all are hitting all of your minimum requirements that are required. So it's a good thing that we're writing a plan so we can go ahead and make sure that we're ticking all these boxes ahead of time because we do this thing pretty often. So here's our proposed schedule for you guys. And this will be shared with everybody on the steering committee, and I'll read through some of this because it's small. Also, we will share information about these input meetings and any public surveys through the city's social media page and on their website through the process. So today is midnight. It's that one there at the top, 7 o'clock. We're having our kickoff public hearing. Like I said, this is basically just to notify everyone in the public that we are starting this process. So if you have anything that you want to say, anything that you think should be included in the city's next 5 years, then we're doing this. So next is we're going to publish an online survey for community input sometime in the next 4 weeks. It's going to be about a 20-question survey, and it's going to cover all the topics that go into a comprehensive plan. And we're basically just trying to tease out people's perspectives and hear about those things that the community needs, maybe some issues that are going on that need to be addressed. And then Carol and I are going to export those results, share that with the city, share that at each input meeting that we have. Like I said, so we can have an informed discussion. And then also give people the opportunity to comment who might not be able to come to these meetings. So next meeting after today is going to be on June 8th at 10 o'clock, unless the city decides that we need to do that at a different time or a different day. And we're going to be going over different topics for each of these meetings, just so you guys know. So we're going to be going over housing, transportation, local infrastructure, water, sewer, etc. at that next meeting. Then we're going to have a third input meeting on June 22nd. That's going to be going over economic development, parks and recreation, future land use, and community work program. So one thing that I want you guys to be doing, if you plan to come to these meetings, is think about projects that you feel like are good for the community over the next 5 years. So you come and be ready to talk about them so you can give us ideas. We are essentially translators for you to get your ideas on paper, and so that the city has a guiding document that represents it well. So keep that in mind. Always come ready to talk. And then as far as in-person meetings, as long as we can cover everything in today and the next 2, and that'll be it for in-person meetings for a little while. We'll get to writing our draft so that we can get it to you as early as possible. If we miss anything or can't cover any important details in those meetings, then we'll schedule another one, and that'll be shared with everybody in the public, like I said. And then in between now and September 1st, if there are any local festivals, I know you have a local market over here on the green. If there are any ways that the city or you all as citizens want to help us get engaged through survey distribution for paper surveys, or if you want to do a meeting in a box, if there are any local committees or HOAs or anything like that you feel like you get involved, then please share those with us, and then we can help you, give you the tools to kind of facilitate those. Okay. So we'll try to do that between now and September 1st, because if it gets too late, then it's hard for us to get that information into the plan. So, and then we will shoot to get you all the final, or the steering committee, final draft of the plan by October 31st. Like I said, 90 days roughly. Try to give everybody plenty of time to review that thing before we send it off to the state. That's the final draft. And then we'll go through that review process, and then hopefully goals. We'll have a final comprehensive plan update February 28th, 2023. That's kind of a recap. Opportunities for public participation. You are in one of them right now. Public hearing number 1. We'll have another public hearing towards the end of the process before we submit to the state. But between them, we're going to have plenty of engagement meetings and surveys to share so that people can get their voice heard. And then we are going to have pretty constant and direct contact with the local government through this process as well, and steering committee. That was the first half of tonight's meeting. There's a lot of information, so I'm going to stop. And does anyone have any questions about what a comprehensive plan is, what goes into it, or the process that I have laid out? Are you receiving comments online? Do you do that? Nope. Okay. All right. All right, so adjourned. That concludes the end of the public hearing. Now we're going to jump into the input session. Okay, so get ready to talk because I need y'all's feedback for this part of it. Okay, and you can leave the streaming too throughout. All the input meetings can be streamed here.
Okay.
So y'all take a second. This is one of the first sections of your comprehensive plan. Like I said, this is 30,000 foot view. So this is big, broad picture stuff. What do you want your community to be in 20 years? What do y'all hope Oxford's going to be? This is the vision statement from 5 years ago. So y'all read this for a second and we'll talk about it. Everybody good? Yeah. All right. Let's have a discussion about this. This is like I said, this is your vision statement from 5 years ago. Vision statements can be however long or short. Sometimes they're 2 sentences, sometimes they're 10 paragraphs. I feel like it's going to have a mixture of be direct. You know, 10 paragraphs on the other side of that. So it's not one clear elevator to the city of Oxford, which y'all have seen. Some good things and good points, you know, collaboration, outdoor recreation, you know, essentially building on the existing characteristics of the community. Anybody want to take a stab at anything? Is there anything that you feel like is missing from here that should be a part of Oxford's vision? Or do y'all feel like this fits you pretty well? Anybody want to start? All right. I was gonna say I'm gonna start calling on you.
The last sentence of the first paragraph, residents will be engaged to support projects that will improve our quality of life. Like most communities, we have a cadre of the usual suspects that participate. Thank God for them. They come forward, they participate, raise a hand, ask questions, stomp and shout sometimes. But I don't think we've done a real good job of reaching out to the distinct neighborhoods within the city and community of Oxford. I don't remember the last time I saw someone here from Oxford Square or someone here from Stone Street. Maybe somebody here now. Not Stone Street, you're down. Yeah, there you go. Queen Anne. They're on the east side of the neighborhood that the city manager lives in. I don't remember the last time someone was here. You might keep it involved in all this.
As you said, we always want the other folks to involve. The object is how do we get them to participate?
Exactly.
We have from time to time sent out flyers specifically in those areas for various reasons for feedback. And we had 2 responses out of the 30 houses that were in the neighborhood. Had a lot. So I think it's more about how do we get them involved as them being involved.
Yeah, that is a constant struggle getting involved, that's for sure. Steps, especially, meetings at 7 o'clock, or just, even if they're not 7 o'clock, even if they're during the day, people work, so it's tough to get, people meeting where they're at, so.
I'm probably the oldest person in here, the deafest one. I'd appreciate if you take the mic and hold it closer to your mouth when you're talking, Mark.
Sorry about that. Okay,
Thank
thank you. All right, you're welcome. Okay, anybody else? Can go back. Anybody else? Yep, yes, sir.
First time I've read the vision statement, but I guess one of the concerns I have is that it seems to be very inward focused,
Mhm.
all about Oxford. What is Oxford's position in the world? What's Oxford's position in the county, relationship with Covington, even with Oxford College? Should there be an opportunity for us to look and see what does Oxford mean in the greater scheme of things rather than just community focus? Or should this vision statement be totally inward focused?
No, yeah, I think that would be a great idea. The world doesn't stop at Oxford city limits, and those influences, goes up just behind the border, so I think that's a good point. For sure. Yeah, thank you. I know that's always a constant struggle too, is collaborating with, between local governments. Everyone's really busy, and being able to, it takes an active effort to be able to get that participation, across jurisdictions. So, okay, yeah, that's a good point. We can definitely incorporate something about that. Anybody else having good aspirations for the city that you feel like we should strive for?
To the first point about engagement and participation, I think it begs the question of what it means to belong to the community and whether or not the residents who fall within the boundaries actually feel as though they belong. And if they don't, what are the implications of that? If everybody's going to participate, you don't have a sense of belonging.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, equity obviously is a huge discussion in the past couple of years. So every community should be looking at equity and how to equally serve all the residents serve with them. So yeah, good point. And especially having a town-gown relationship, push forward, that sometimes comes with that. It's an important thing to stay aware of. Yeah. So we've got equity, communication with residents, influence past the borders of the city limits. Good points. Anybody else? All right, we can jump back to this too. Like I said, every point through this process will kind of tease out new things. So let me know if y'all come up with an idea and we'll go back. These right here are the goals and policies that essentially correspond with that vision statement. This is part of the same chapter in Oxford. These are the goals and policies from 5 years ago. Still that 30,000 foot view. So these aren't, direct written ordinances or anything like that. They're just overarching goals that the city will, essentially try to use to guide their decision making. So this is a good bit of reading. So I'll kind of paraphrase a little bit. But it's got a few things in here about efforts that the city is going to be doing or would like to be based on 5 years ago. Enforcement of code ordinances, that first one. Sound fiscal responsibility and transparency. Keeping up with local infrastructure through water and sewer. Making sure you're maintaining control over your environmental impacts of growth. It's a big one. Staying involved, through keeping people involved through local committees and commissions, and they all have several, so that's a great thing to continue. Expanding that parks and trail system, that's something that Bill and I have been working on with the sustainability committee a lot lately. Put together with Streets and Trails plan that we are pretty close to putting together. So are obviously working on that actively. Adding wayfinding signage. I know UGA came and did a big wayfinding study about 7 years ago, so that might be a good one to follow up on this comprehensive plan update. Some more about collaboration between Oxford College and the city, and that'll always be an ongoing relationship to keep and maintain. Attract community supportive and sensitive commercial uses. I wanted to point out that one specifically because ever since I've been coming to Oxford for about 6 or 7 years now, you know, I know there's always been a plan to have a town center. So I want to hash out that discussion here in a little bit to hear what y'all's thoughts are, see if y'all's goals for that town center are still what they were. So I know a lot of design work, a lot of community input went into the thought process of that. So that's going to be something we're going to talk about in a minute. That's up there as a big goal. And then promoting and examining new uses for existing resources. Are chock full of historic resources, and they're all beautiful. So, you know, I know y'all cherish those, and that's an important resource to have. So that'll be an important area that will kind of continue throughout this conference. And then the last one is another big topic to talk about is attracting young families. So I want to talk about, or I want to hear y'all's perspective about how successful y'all been at doing that so far. I guess I'll end with that one. How have y'all been? Have y'all noticed that a lot of young families have moved here, or y'all kind of struggling with that? How you doing?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
And you know, further back, it's always been an old community, because people didn't want to move on to like the lifestyle that we presented as a city.
Mhm.
But as they have aged out and moved on, some younger folks have come in. And they are coming into some of these older houses and renovating them very nicely with their families. But the park that we put into place, I think, has been a driver to attracting some of that, because they have a place for the kids to go and exercise.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's a big thing with us millennials, giving us a park so we can take our kids and have fun. Exactly. Okay, that's good. Anybody else have any other comments about, you know, new residents and everything? Y'all feel like it's a pretty important place to live? Y'all struggle with that at all? Yes, sir.
Not the new residents, but really, first of all, are the goals and policies required to be indexed? Because it's somewhat problematic, because you've got very prescriptive policies in here, but you've got broad goals.
Yeah.
And it seems to be better to maybe separate the two, so you let the goals drive major policies. It seems like more intuitive way to do it. The question I would have regarding goals would be sustainability. I know it's embedded in a lot of in the language of some of the policies, they're not clear. And so maybe a separate line that really talks about Oxford being a sustainable community from both an environmental perspective, a social perspective, and an economic perspective. Okay. Thinking about, you know, how we sustain this community from a variety of contexts.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And to that point too, I was talking with the sustainability committee a couple of weeks ago on a monthly meeting about incorporating several points about sustainability and goals and specific work program items over the next 5 years, specifically targeting that. So yeah, and I like your idea about goals and policies and splitting it up too. Yeah, we'll explore that for sure. So, okay.
So we are trying to, in conversation at least, to make sure that our ordinances and other city-driven things are sustainable. In other words, have the sustainability committee communicate with the planning commission. And I think we're now looking at a green building code that is an international building code and that sort of thing. So it's at times discouraging process, but because the ordinances are a massive thing, and they are, as you say, very prescriptive, and sometimes I think a little bit too tight. I'm not a big fan of zoning because of separate uses. I think a strong, sustainable building code would do everything you would ever want a zoning code to do. because nobody is going, if you had a strong enough building code, nobody would ever think about going over there on West Fifth Street and putting a mini mart, because they couldn't drive enough things economically to overcome what they would have to put in the building to make it a sustainable green commercial building. That would be my hope, that we would basically get to that point.
Okay. Yeah, it's a needle to thread, zoning codes, because you can end up with 1,000-page zoning code very easily, because they're so restrictive. So, okay, gotcha. Anybody else have any other comments about ordinances specifically? Since we're on that topic, I have something up here about enforcing code ordinances. So sometimes I read that as there are an issue with derelict properties in a community, if it's something that made its way into the goals and policies. Do y'all feel like code enforcement is something that could be improved in the city of Oxford, or are y'all sitting in a pretty good place with that?
So, what was the nature of the question?
As far as property upkeep, code enforcement, things like that, is that an issue that the city experiences, or is that or do y'all feel like it is a need that's well met right now? Is code enforcement well used?
We shouldn't drive this conversation, but since that was put together, we did onboard the code enforcement and building department. So they have been working with the city folks on certain properties throughout to try to keep the derelict buildings under control and some of the trashy yards and all. So there's some progress made there. There always can be more.
That's something that y'all are actively addressing with resorts. Another thing I wanted to touch on is wayfinding. There was two things up here related to wayfinding and getting around town in a car. Do y'all feel like that's still a need or a big goal that you guys should strive for? Or do y'all feel like it's pretty well accomplished so far? I have a lot of pass-through traffic through 81, but as far as the other local roads, they're pretty low traffic. So I know that's the way you like them. They're easy to use for recreation and alternative transportation. So anybody want to touch on wayfinding or trails?
I think people would like to, one of the things that the city has done when they built the big park, that park is being used continually by a massive amount of people, which is a good thing. The only thing that I've been a little bit concerned with, especially on Emory Street, is the sidewalks stop. So if anybody's trying to walk on the sidewalk on Emory Street to get to the park, they have to go over to the next street, which is not a bad street. It's not like there's a lot of traffic, but it seems like if we can move some sidewalks at least down farther to allow people to walk, because I live on Emory Street and I see a lot of people walking up and down the sidewalk. And it ends right at Palmerstone School. Well, if you want to go anywhere else, you got to go this way, you got to go that way, you got to go around. It might be nice to have some more sidewalks that at least go to the park, or maybe even a little bit past the park, for the people that they were talking about, so they could come back to the park.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, for sure. I know a couple of years ago, y'all put together a map, a historic tour. Has anybody noticed we have a lot of visitors that use that, that go by that route? Is there anybody in this room that actively is engaged with that map at all?
Well, actually, I was on that committee that did that brochure,
Okay.
and, the last time we ordered it, we had a heck of a time finding it. Yeah. But that speaks to the fact that we do not have a lot of drop-in visitors.
Mhm.
Usually it's people from the college here for Parents' Day, or someone comes to visit family, and it's more of that type of thing. But, speaking about sidewalk, we have that engineering done now, right, Bill, going north?
Yeah, we have it's about a $1.1 million North Emory Street sidewalk project. It's actually just finished its first round of review with DOT last week, and they had some comments, so the engineer is working on addressing those comments, and we had hoped to have that project out to bid actually this month, but we're behind schedule, and I'm kind of questioning your engineer about that quite a bit, and I sent an email today. So that project will be under construction hopefully, later this summer or early fall at the latest. But that'll be a significant addition to the sidewalks on.
But I think you hit a larger point in my mind. If young people, we want people to come in with families, we have to provide accessibility to all these so-called attractions. The town center, the park, where they are comfortable walking there. I've seen ladies, and the gentlemen pushing carriages with babies and going to the park. Well, let's go 2 blocks out of the way to get to the park, and I have spent a long time trying, as someone who walked, destination walk in a lot of my youth, I didn't have an automobile and that sort of thing. If destination walkers take beelines, they do not amble around the neighborhood. They've got a destination, they want to go there, bang. So that kind of accessibility that you're talking about speaks very strongly to what kind of people would, and if it's older people like me, you will be that way someday. And you want to be able to walk directly as well, and without fear of falling or being attacked by an automobile. So I think that's a strong point, tie together. That's one of the things that I've always had trouble with, is we aren't tying things together. We have a sustainability committee that's doing everything it can and doing a good job. A planning commission that's doing a good job, but they aren't talking to one another. It isn't all tied together into a cohesive unit to speak to the various things that you guys are talking about.
I have another question about your sustainability. I've noticed that we have lots of lights going up and down the street, which is fantastic. Has the city ever thought about doing solar lights? I know they're becoming more popular. Some of them have problems with them, that after 2 or 3 years they leave or something like that. But I thought if the city put up solar lights, they wouldn't have to run the electricity. They wouldn't have to do all the things that, to hook up all the things like that. And even if the solar light, I don't know if this is a commercial solar light, but I looked it up one time to just to see about putting it on my property, and they talked about it being commercial, but it was like $300 or $400 for a light. And I thought, even if the light only lasted for 10 years, which I don't like things that you throw away, but if it cost $400 and you didn't have to hook it up, you didn't have to do a lot of things to go with it, you just threw it on the side. If something did happen to it, you're not out a lot of money. So maybe the city should consider more lights and, on the poles and things like that, they're already there.
When you should ask that.
Okay.
It so happens that one of the council members who was on the sustainability committee, husband is a lighting engineer for Cooley Brands. So there is a lot of conversation about that and how best to do it, using that local expertise that we do have. So we're trying.
Okay, I just thought,
But I do appreciate the question. It does. These things make the council know that these things are important for citizens' minds. I appreciate it.
well, which is the bad part. The next street over, there's a light that goes on and off. I've been meaning to stop in and say something to somebody. But if we had more solar lights, you know, you could light up the city a lot more and it wouldn't necessarily cost a whole lot of money. You're not running, you know, hard lines, you know, 2 or 3 miles long to get each light attached.
I get it. I mean,
All right, well, thanks, guys. So, get back to this. So I feel like, you know, number 5 could deserve a rewrite, you know, trying to have a goal, make a goal to get a little more active in communication between all your commissions, all your committees and everything. Sounds like that would be a good thing to incorporate in here. And then a couple others. So we'll work on this list a little bit, share it at the next meeting, see what y'all say then.
I think number 8 is very vague. It's not easy to
Yeah,
measure the success of it.
very true. Yep. Okay. Give number 8 a tackle. That's kind of difficulty with goals and policies also is that they're so broad. They're meant to be so broad that sometimes it's hard to have a metric go with it too, but thank you for that.
I think number 11 is going to be an issue for as long as schools continue to be an issue, which may be far beyond the scope of what the city can take on. But when I think about young families coming to the college, and I think about where they choose to live, it's not local.
Mhm.
Often it's because they have children in the household. It's driven by access to better schools.
Gotcha. And they don't have any public schools within the city limits, right? Because this one every year is not technically, it's a special needs school, right? Yeah, so that, I mean, it's a
And
public
it's
school,
not,
but
it's
it's
not
for a
just
special
a city
population.
limit, right.
Yeah.
It's a county thing. It's not just a city thing. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
but it's based on the point you were making a while ago about where do we fit in the grand scheme of things.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Right, and there can be language in this for sure, and that is relevant. Unfortunately, Board of Education is their own, their own body, so we can't tell them what to do, but we can definitely put language in there for it, so that the city knows what's.
Just to rerun, real quick, I know you're ready to go on to the next slide. These are the goals and policies that the council set 2017, 5 years ago.
Right.
Are there ways to put bullet points underneath each one of these to say, and this is what we did, or this is what we didn't do, so that we can see that too? Because I think that'd be helpful. Not just to see, here's what we said we were going to do, well, here's what we did. Like we talked about a minute ago, some of the things, Jim, you're talking about. I mean, I was on council for 4 years. If I was on council, I'd want to have those bullet points so that people coming to this process would know. And we did do some of this, but what was it? And we did do some of this, and what was that?
Yeah.
So where is that? That would be something I would want to continue to see as part of this process.
And is this in fact still valid?
Yeah. What are we still doing? Or, we can throw one of these out because maybe we completed kind of what we want to do, and maybe people don't want to go down this path anymore.
Yeah. So it is kind of difficult to show all at once. There is, you remember a little while ago, I mentioned the report of accomplishments.
Yeah.
So what these goals and policies do, this is a big level step right here. How are we going to get, where we want to be in 20 years? And then following this section, there's a needs and opportunities chapter. And what you're essentially doing with a comprehensive plan is you're building a narrative to get you to the very end. Think of it like an upside down pyramid, essentially. Getting bigger and narrowing it down until you get to that community work program. And those are the specific projects that are bulleted, that bulletin list essentially that the city has as a project list. And the report of accomplishments, which I'll send out sooner rather than later to get filled out, will have a notes section so that you can mark every project as accomplished, not accomplished, postponed, abandoned, ongoing, so on and so forth. So that list will be made.
Cool.
And it'll be a part of the document. So, yeah.
That would be a short-term work program, would it not?
Correct. Short-term work program or community work program.
Short-term work program is about 10 pages long.
Yeah, so that's a discussion that we'll get into at the next meeting. And there are 2 ways you can go about short-term work program. You can be extremely ambitious and have a 10-page long one. Or you can be a little bit more realistic and kind of rein that in. It depends on the community. There's no amount of there aren't any negatives that come with not accomplishing your work program essentially from the state level. They're not going to penalize you because you only accomplish 10% of your short-term work program. However, on the other side of that coin, if you accomplish 90% of it, then you'll remember a little while ago I mentioned that plan first designation. If you can show the state, hey, we're accomplishing our goals, we're doing our projects, we're getting them knocked out, then that makes you more makes you more competitive to apply for plan first designation or water first designation. And that gives you special privileges when it comes to applying for grants to accomplish community projects. So it does yourself a solid if you can accomplish more of your work program items. Yes, sir.
Any insights that Northeast Georgia Regional Commission give us regarding communities that have been successful, in defining their goals, accomplishing those goals, and continuing to pursue those goals?
Yeah.
Any ideas or recommendations from staff and also community input, and citizen input in order for that to occur?
Yeah, so one thing that we've been trying to get better and better about over the years is to make the short-term work program items more specific. So if you look at your one from 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago, probably what you're going to see is there are going to be several work program items that are like continuing items. The city will continue to enforce code enforcement, for example. That's something that happens just regularly on a regular day-to-day basis. So obviously you'll accomplish it very easily, but it's not something that has like very clear metrics of, yeah, we accomplished this. DCA is looking for more specific projects that are targeted. The city will upgrade its water line on this road, something like that. And what that does too is it helps you with grant applications because you can show whatever agency that you're applying for a grant with, hey, we planned for this, we identified this as a big need, and here now we're trying to implement it and apply for this grant. Please fund this. So that's one way, is to be very specific and targeted with your work program items. And another one is to be, like I said a little while ago, a little bit more realistic. Don't have 150 work items, maybe have something like 50. And so that's another good way to kind of bring that in, be very realistic, I guess, about what you can accomplish in 5 years. So, but I can put together a list of all the Plan First communities in our region, so that y'all can see that list and see, what a good community as a reference point would be. Okay. So one of the next things I mentioned a little while ago, I wanted to talk to y'all about was that town center. It's not the only thing that we're going to talk about with this map, but this is that future land use map that I mentioned. This is going to be one of the chapters of your comprehensive plan. There are two ways that the state regulates how this is put together. You can go with traditional future land use topics, which are clinical, parcel by parcel designations. This is residential, this is commercial, very similar to a zoning ordinance. And it essentially will mirror your zoning ordinance unless there are areas that you want to change. And then there are character areas. And so the city chose to do character areas instead. And what these are zones. They're still good by parcel boundaries, but they're zones or clusters of parcels that have a specific character that the city, either is existing or the city wants to see it have. So like I said, not just character areas last time. Definitely, both of those have benefits. So character areas give the city flexibility in its zoning decisions. Whenever someone requests a rezone, and you have this cluster of parcels that you're trying to get to have that specific character, it gives you that flexibility in decision making. Future land use method, a little bit more clinical, less flexible, but allows you to target parcel by parcel how you want your community to grow. Like I said, benefits to both. I know y'all had a lot of discussions over the past years about your town center. Does everybody feel like y'all's goal is still there? Do y'all still want to see this area right here develop as a town center? Yes, no, you guys kind of think about that for the next couple of years or a couple of months. Does anybody have any comments today for that? Sir?
Yeah, I tried to go to 2 or 3 of those 4 meetings and make some good suggestions. And all of a sudden, after the second time I went there, they got real quiet, and they have specific goals, which I think is fantastic. But all of a sudden, the sunshine didn't shine a lot in that meeting with that group. So I just assumed that, why don't you just either say, we're gonna have one, or give it up?
Yeah. So it's a tough thing, and land use is a contentious topic sometimes, so, obviously you have to kind of work city and local government and private developers, and whether or not that interest is there or not, sounds like a discussion. So is that town center development, is that pretty quiet now? Or is it, you know, something?
We don't know.
You don't know? Okay. Gotcha. All right, y'all feel like y'all's vision has changed at all over the past 5 years? That's still something that, you know, as a community, you guys are still feeling pretty passionate about?
As chairman of this steering committee,
Sir.
I would like to see our comprehensive plan be a tool for each committee to use to guide them about what this city wants and where it wants the city to go. Just instead of sitting up there on the shelf somewhere in the building, collecting dust and just satisfying the state. I know we got to do that. The law says we have to do that. But we're spending all this time and then we don't use it as a guide to go forward.
Yeah.
That does not make sense to me.
I agree.
And that sounds to me like what I'm hearing from some of the folks behind me. And, you know, that time is valuable, their energy is valuable. They gave up something to come in here and spend it here instead of somewhere else. So that deserves to be highly respected, in my opinion. So please say anything that you have to say, but I will write it down and go forward.
I agree. You just said it. You had your hand raised, sir. What would you like to say?
I'm just going to circle back around to the comment on the educational situation, both in Oxford and for Newton County, and suggest that probably the biggest bang for the town's buck would be to establish a K-12 school that delivered excellent results. I think that would be a catalyst that would bring in young families, and I think it would make a lot of other meaningful contributions to the life of the town and the vibe and the energy.
Yes, sir.
I think the example of the city park, where a lot of engagement was done by fact finding from the community, you know, suggests that, yes, the city can move forward and get behind the project. And it's very successful, it meets the needs of the community very well. See lots of people out there walking and interacting with everybody else. I think the town center was probably the idea of a small nucleus of people. Didn't have the broader buy-in of the community. And I would suggest that maybe step back and look at and define what we think we need as a community that the town center should be. And start with maybe not a clean palette, but at least and more engaging and encouraging input from the broader community.
Okay. Yeah, good point.
Might even use the park as a place to have that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Pretty well used on the weekends. Lots of people there. Yeah. Good to know.
A cross-section of it.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that. We will note that for input for this. That's the main, town center was the main thing that I wanted to touch on for future land use. So, what we'll do, as part of the survey, or the online survey too, is have a question about land use and see what people's opinions are about that. And I'll have a written section too, so that you can provide comments, maybe hash out a little bit more details on the concept of future land use map.
Can I ask a question about the online survey?
Yeah,
This will be out to anybody and everybody.
anybody and everybody. And we have
We know how surveys work. They sometimes get response and many times don't. I work with college students, so I know how we get college students to respond, and that's incentive. What's the incentive to take the survey? Other than, I know the betterment of the community, but let's be honest, right? What can somebody know they're gonna get if I take this survey? 3 people get a gift card to Amazon or whatever it is. I'd be willing to donate to that cause. But what's the incentive to take the survey besides my community?
Good point. There's not one unless the community wants to add one. I've never had seen an incentive tied to a public survey specifically for content reports. But I did work with Porterdale about a year and a half ago on their conference plan update. It was in the thick of COVID. And what we did was we had a photo competition in the town. We asked everybody to go and take a picture of their favorite place in town, submit it to city clerk by a certain day. And then the steering committee voted on which this picture was. I included all those pictures in the comprehensive plan. And one of the local business owners gave a $100 gift card to their salon. And I think like a gift package of food stuff for the person who was selected as winner. So that's one example. So if y'all have a local business owner that wants to participate in something like that, then we can do something like that. Excuse me. And as far as the online survey, I don't have any good examples for you on this other than, yeah, it'll be shared through the city's channels and hopefully people will fill it out.
We have about to come up on the biggest event of the year for the city of Oxford, the July 4th parade. And that might be a good time if we can get an adequate number of volunteers to go to the park during that. That's where all the events are going to take place after the parade.
So they're gonna have it this year? Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Marcia's in charge. She's doing a fantastic job.
Oh, it's not gonna be on the
We've already broken the fact. You got to go to talk to them.
It's not gonna be on Emory Street?
No, there's too much involved in shut down. And we have to get permission from the state to shut
Oh, I
down.
understand that.
And we only have a very small window to get the parade through. And we struggled with that in the past.
Those big trucks coming through, they have a tough time.
Yeah. And I can't get home after the parade because they all still lined up from the driveway.
Well, that's important.
So that's the reason we moved it off. It's too hard to deal with.
Will the survey be designed in such a way that can be easily completed on phone?
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, so if y'all ever heard of a program called Esri, it's a global mapping software that planners like to use. And they have a survey tool called Survey 123, and it's a format called Story Map. And so essentially it'd be like 3 scrollable pages with an embedded survey in there. So it'll be easily accessible. We have a QR code if people want to use that, or a link that will be shared on the social media and website. People just have to click on it with their phone or their computer and go and fill it out. So it is easily accessible with both. And thank you for letting me know about that July 4th, because we'll definitely create something before that. So yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
I guess if you talked about the survey, you may not like this item, but I guess if you gave everybody that filled in the survey and sent it back, $10 off their electric bill.
I have heard that one before.
You get a better response.
Okay. You want a survey, you want a license?
I have heard that one before.
I'm telling you,
The water bill.
incentives.
Yeah.
That's the only way to get people to do it. Self-interest. Self-interest drives everything.
Yeah.
I like to say it doesn't. I'm a clergy member. I want people to give, be servants, but self-interest drives everything. First rule of community. So give them an incentive.
A lot of times,
Do it for something.
depending on the community, a lot of times the incentive is, there's a big controversial project going on, we see it, everyone brought it up. Are there any big controversial things coming in pipeline for Oxford that I need to know about? Because that's something that's important in our discussion. So, is there anything huge like your coming in that is important to know now ahead of time? Something that we can't talk about. Okay. There is something. Okay. We'll talk about it maybe later at the next meeting.
Why they talk about like.
Okay. I hope so. on the incentive part, we'll release that public survey within the next 4 weeks. And that will be advertised. And if there's an incentive, we'll let y'all know. Everybody raise your hand. I should have done this at the beginning. Everybody raise your hand if you're on the steering committee. 3 people. All right, the rest of y'all are regular citizens. Thank you for coming.
In all fairness, one of the committee members got to die, so she's not here.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, we are.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, should have done that at the beginning. Thanks to everybody for coming. Like I said earlier, these are some of the major issues, topics that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be teasing out these major issues through those surveys, through our next 2 in-person meetings. The next 2 meetings are going to be here. Is there any problem with the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock time for the next meeting? Bill or anybody for city council? Are y'all okay with that? Those times as the work sessions, or would y'all prefer those to be 9 meetings?
Not the work session.
Not the work sessions.
You can have surveys here, but we usually cover too much ground in a work session to throw this in the middle of it.
Okay. Gotcha. We'll keep the times as they proposed.
Is that list a fixed list or is it something that?
No, I just threw them up there. Those are just some of the major topics that kind of come up, recurringly through those communities, conference and plan discussions. Just an example list of things that sometimes present major issues. These are things we're going to be talking about. So there's one to throw it up there so that can kind of get y'all's brain stimulating and think about this over the next couple of weeks, so that at the next work session that you come to, or if you want to fill out that survey, you're prepared, to think about or what to write. So.
One thing you can put on ours, I believe, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, development. Because of everything that's going on at Stanton Springs, housing prices have gone through the roof. Developers are already calling. There've been some that tried to circumvent everybody, but they could and take around coming the back door. Fortunately, Bill has stood up to them and told them they can't do it that way. We have a process and we're going to follow the process. But there's a lot of land, some of it within the city, some of it bound in the city. That may be something you guys might want to think about and put ideas forward. It's coming.
Yeah, so a lot of times on this first meeting, sometimes you'll see planners do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis. I don't love those. Kind of if they're ever used, but that's why I didn't do them. I do one tonight. But I wouldn't consider it a threat or an opportunity per se. It kind of just depends on your perspective. But you're right, and that a lot of stuff pressure for development is coming. I-20, which comes right through your south boundary, is considered the last undeveloped interstate corridor in Georgia. And then now we've got Rivian coming in 1 county over, and then everything else is Stanton Springs. So you guys are probably going to experience a lot of development pressure over the next couple of years. So that's why it's important to have these discussions every 5 years, because 10 years is too long. And things might change you guys over between that. So yeah, definitely wanted to point that out to you today. But that's everything that I have. I basically just wanted to use tonight to hear a little bit of what y'all's ideas were. See if there were any major topics or anything that came up that we know about ahead of time. And then share what the schedule is going to be. Officially announced that this process is starting. So Carol over here is going to be one of the main ones leading this process, this plan update, along with me. So like I said, you'll hear from us a good bit, especially if you're on the steering committee, and we get emails from the street council. So keep an ear out for that. Here's our contact information. I'll leave some of my cards over there on the back table too. If at any point between now and February, y'all want to share any information with me that you feel like I should know, please email me or call me in the office. We're always available. So 8:35. We're always available. So yeah. Does anybody have any other comments that you want to share before we call it a night?
I'd like to say one final thing. My email is on the website. Please, if anything you want to talk about, anything, just send it to me. And, the whole time of profanity, my grandchildren all getting my. I appreciate it.
Mr. Jim, we might ought to announce your email because that particular page isn't working on the website right now.
Well, it's J1 at Oxford, Georgia. Well, that, or not spelled out.
You know you can type that.
That's all right.
You know you can type that.
Thank you, Mr. Wyndham, we appreciate it, and thanks, little guy, you're the youngest person I've ever seen at a public hearing. I should have brought some ice cream, I'm sorry.
I'd like to see that.
Every day, that's a good way, that's good for public input.
That's right.
Few people.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you, everybody, for coming again. I'll stick around, if you have any questions, I'll talk one-on-one. Just come up and talk to me, okay? Yes, if you haven't signed in, sign in on the sign-in sheet, so we can, everybody here.
Oh, they don't.